Here's something nobody tells you about water. For most of human history, it was trying to kill you. Not dramatically, not obviously, just quietly, consistently, every single day. A river that looked perfectly clean could carry cholera, typhoid, dysentery. A pond that animals drank from could wipe out an entire settlement in a week. There were no water treatment plants, no filters, no way to know whether the thing you were about to drink would hydrate you or end you. So our ancestors found a solution. They drank something else. Something that killed bacteria, something that preserved food, something the body could actually process safely, something that also, as a side effect, made everything feel slightly better. And here's the part that completely reframes everything you think you know about alcohol. We didn't choose to drink it, we evolved to need it. Let's start with what water actually was before civilization figured out plumbing. Because we have a very sanitized, no pun intended, view of this. You turn on a tap, clean water comes out. You don't think about it. For the vast majority of human history, that experience was impossible. Water sources, rivers, lakes, ponds, streams, were shared with every animal in the landscape. Animals that urinated and defecated directly into those same water sources. Animals that died in those water sources and decomposed in them. The water our ancestors had access to was a cocktail of bacteria, parasites, animal waste, rotting organic matter, and things we still don't have names for. Drinking it wasn't just risky, it was genuinely dangerous. And here's something that gets left out of history lessons. The ancient world knew this. Not in a scientific way. They didn't understand germ theory. They had no concept of bacteria. But they understood through brutal trial and error, generations of people getting violently ill from water, that certain water sources were deadly. The Romans boiled water when they could. The Greeks drank water almost exclusively from mountain springs and deep wells. The Bible contains almost no references to water as a common daily drink. The ancient Chinese boiled everything. These weren't coincidences. These were populations that had learned through mass death that their water supply was not safe. So what did people actually drink? The answer is something that happened by accident, long before anyone understood why it worked. Fermentation. Leave fruit in a warm place. Leave grains sitting in water. Leave honey exposed to moisture. And something remarkable happens without any human intervention. Wild yeast, which exists literally everywhere in the air around you right now, begins converting the sugars in those foods into alcohol. The result is a liquid that does something miraculous. It kills bacteria. Not completely, not like modern antibiotics, but ethanol, even at low concentrations, creates an environment where the pathogens that were trying to kill you in the river simply cannot survive. The earliest evidence of intentional fermentation comes from China, a Neolithic village called Jiahu around 7000 BCE. Chemical analysis of pottery jars found residue of a fermented mixture of rice, honey, and fruit, 9,000 years old. And that's just the earliest we've found. The actual practice almost certainly goes back much further. Because here's the thing about fermented beverages that most people don't realize. They weren't strong. Ancient beer and wine were nothing like what you buy today. They were typically 1 to 3% alcohol. Weak, slightly fizzy, nutritious. Basically liquid bread. You could drink them all day, every day, do normal work, live a normal life. What they couldn't do was give you cholera. The medieval world understood this completely. There's a reason monks brewed beer. A reason every civilization that figured out fermentation immediately made it central to daily life. A reason children in medieval Europe drank weak ale instead of water. It wasn't because they liked being drunk. It was because the ale wouldn't kill them and the water might. Now here's where the story gets genuinely strange. Because the water safety explanation, accurate as it is, only covers the last 10,000 years or so, our relationship with alcohol is much older than that. Much, much older. In 2014, a team of researchers at the Foundation for Applied Molecular Evolution did something extraordinary. They didn't study ancient pottery or dig up archaeological sites. They resurrected ancient enzymes. Using genetic sequencing from 19 modern primates, they reconstructed the evolutionary history of an enzyme called ADH4, alcohol dehydrogenase 4. This is the enzyme that sits in your mouth and digestive tract and breaks down ethanol when you consume it. What they found was remarkable. Around 10 million years ago, long before there were humans, long before there was agriculture, long before anyone had ever intentionally fermented anything, a common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas underwent a mutation. A single genetic change that made ADH4 40 times more efficient at metabolizing ethanol. 40 times. And it happened right around the same time our ancestors came down from the trees and started spending more time on the ground. Which matters because of something very specific about ground level life: fallen fruit. Fruit that falls from trees doesn't stay fresh. It sits on the ground, exposed to wild yeast in the environment, and it begins to ferment. By the time an animal finds it and eats it, it often contains low levels of ethanol. Primates without the efficient ADH4 mutation, lemurs, baboons, get intoxicated from small amounts of fermented fruit. Their metabolisms can't handle it. They'd get drunk, become easy prey, and in a world full of predators, that's a very quick way to not pass on your genes. Primates with the mutation could eat that same fruit, process the ethanol efficiently, absorb the calories, and walk away completely fine. This is called the drunken monkey hypothesis, and it suggests something profound. We didn't start drinking alcohol when we invented fermentation. We were already biologically pre-adapted to process it, 10 million years before we figured out how to make it on purpose. Now here's a theory that sounds insane, but has serious academic support. Alcohol didn't just help civilization survive. It might have caused civilization in the first place. The standard story of how humans stopped being hunter-gatherers and started farming goes like this. We discovered that grain was nutritious, we figured out we could grow it intentionally, we settled down to tend our crops, and civilization followed. That story has a problem. Grain is not delicious. Raw grain is tough, bitter, hard to digest, not particularly nutritious without significant processing. Hunting and gathering gave our ancestors a far more varied and nutritionally complete diet than early farming did. So why would anyone deliberately choose to do the hard work of farming? Some researchers, including archaeologist Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania, have proposed an answer: beer. Specifically, the desire to reliably produce fermented grain beverages was so powerful that it drove the entire agricultural revolution. We didn't settle down because we wanted bread. We settled down because we wanted beer. This is not fringe thinking. It's actively debated in serious academic circles, and there's supporting evidence. Some of the oldest known grain storage sites in the archaeological record show evidence of fermentation before they show evidence of bread making. The oldest known brewery is 13,000 years old. It predates settled agriculture in that region. And grain, which humans had been eating in small amounts for hundreds of thousands of years, only started being cultivated at massive scale right around the same time fermentation technology developed. Correlation isn't causation, but it's a remarkably consistent correlation. But there's one more layer to this that goes beyond survival and beyond agriculture: alcohol as social technology. Here's something that gets overlooked in most discussions of why ancient humans drank. Shared intoxication is one of the most powerful social bonding mechanisms ever discovered. When a group of people undergo a shared, altered experience together, a collective shift in consciousness, it creates a sense of connection and mutual trust that is extraordinarily difficult to replicate any other way. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this. Shared rituals synchronize neural activity. They increase oxytocin levels. They build group identity in measurable, documented ways. Ancient humans sitting around a fire sharing fermented fruit weren't just hydrating safely. They were building the social bonds that made cooperation possible, that made group hunting possible, that made protecting territory possible, that made passing knowledge between generations possible. The ritual drinking circle wasn't a party, it was infrastructure. And this explains something that puzzles historians: why virtually every ancient civilization that ever existed on every continent, with no contact with each other, independently developed fermented beverages and built ritual significance around them. The Sumerians had beer so central to their culture, it appeared in their earliest writing. Egyptian workers building the pyramids received daily beer rations as part of their pay. The Greeks built entire philosophical traditions around communal wine drinking. Indigenous cultures across the Americas, Africa, and Asia all developed their own fermented beverages independently. Not because they were all addicted, because they had all independently discovered the same thing: that a drink you share with someone means something. So, why did ancient humans drink alcohol before water? Because water was trying to kill them, and alcohol wasn't. Because 10 million years ago, their ancestors evolved the ability to process ethanol efficiently, and that mutation stayed in the human genome because it worked. Because fermentation may have been so valuable that entire civilizations reorganized themselves around producing it reliably. And because sharing a drink with another person is one of the oldest and most effective ways humans have ever found to say, "I trust you, we're in this together." Your evening drink is not a modern indulgence. It's a 10-million-year-old biological adaptation dressed up in a glass. The next time someone offers you a drink, they're doing something humans have been doing since before we were fully human. They're doing something that might have made us human in the first place.